Hello and welcome back to Airport of the Future and to our final panel session of the day on real-world applications of artificial intelligence, sponsored by Bags ID. My name is Holly and I'm the editor of International Airport Review, and I'm here to introduce you to your moderator for this session, Maurice Jenkins. Maurice is an esteemed member of our advisory board, and he is also Director of Information Systems and Telecommunications at Miami International Airport. We're nearly ready to go here. Just want to remind you to submit any questions that you have for our panelists in the live discussion box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And we'll try and get through as many of those questions as possible. But for now, I will hand over to Maurice to introduce the session and our fantastic panelists. So Maurice, over to you.
Beautiful. Holly, first of all, thank you very much for that introduction. Greatly appreciate it, and good afternoon, everyone. Good day, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on what part of the region and the world that you are in. In today's session, when we're talking about AI, what I really wanted to do as we looked at that, and we have 4 distinguished panel members today that's going to enlighten you and having some discussion and applying AI, not just in the theoretical sense, but applying AI within the business framework sense of the air transport industry. Realizing one thing of the many challenges that we have airports have faced in moving 4 billion people in our global landscape, dealing with a pandemic, trying to look at getting back to what we deem to be the new normal, how to get passengers back in our airports, back on airplanes, and enjoying that level of leisure and business travel. How do we do that efficiently, effectively, and also do it safely, and try to get back to where we were and project ourselves in moving air transport into the future? So with that, we've laid a framework out today with 4 distinguished individuals, and I'd like to introduce them individually and then open the floor for them to give you a brief overview of their envisionment of AI. And then we're going to have a great fireside chat to be able to allow you to be able to engage with the audience as we engage in dialogue. Our first panel member is going to be Mr. Brian Cobb, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. Our second panelist today is going to be Ms. Karen Lin, Head of Innovation for Swedavia Airports. Third is Mr. Victor Fernandez, Head of IT and Innovation for in Cape Verde for Aeropuertos e Seguridad area. And last but not least, we have Mr. Marion Vandermeer, Founder and CEO of Bags ID. So first, let me introduce Mr. Brian Cobb to you. Brian?
Maurice, great to be with you. And Holly, thank you for all of your support in the International Airport Review team's support in getting this team together. Fantastic opportunity. Maurice, as you stated, we all know that our aviation industry is highly complex. How do we decomplicate it? And I think we're finding a tremendous opportunity really ahead in advanced and really automation. And really it comes down to that computer vision, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Really, what does that truly mean? Frankly, on the CVG front, we've delved in both feet, put our swimmies on, jumped into the deep end of the pool, and really are trialing many aspects, everything from land side to the air side. And what is that? We're looking at our curb front activity to try to determine how do we ease flow for the consumer that is coming back in rapid numbers. All the way to the gate side. What's happening on those aircraft? Even though that we're not in control necessarily of each individual airline opportunity, we really do have an option to pursue what is happening in our operation to help facilitate an improved flying experience, particularly on time. And especially in an environment with a medium-sized hub such as CVG, really we don't have necessarily all of the full-scale accoutrements that perhaps a major hub would have. So really, what is it that we're playing in the space as far as medium and small size airports that we can really facilitate an affordable, low cost solution that really enters into the fray and can support aviation in total? Maurice, thanks.
Thank you. Now we'll turn it over to Karen.
Thank you, Maurice. And Brian introduced this quite well as well, and innovation and technology will be important going forward and driving the development of our airports and improving both passenger experience and operational efficiency. So at Swedavia, we also have been experimenting and working with AI, having it as a focus area for the innovation department. we've worked with chatbots, we've looked into computer vision, machine learning, and so on. And I think there's a lot of opportunity going forward, looking also at autonomous vehicles and so on. So I think getting the smarter, more automated airport will be something very interesting for the future.
Okay, thank you. Victor.
Hi, good afternoon to all and my fellow panelists and the moderator and to the audience. First, I'd like to thank International Airport View for the invitation, and glad to be here to learn new experience, to share our experiences. First, just a little background on Cabo Verde, in case some of the audience is less acquainted with Cabo Verde and set the scenes for our airports. We are an archipelago of 10 islands in the Atlantic Ocean, some 300 miles west coast of Africa. My company is state-owned, and we manage 4 international airports and 3 regional airports. In terms of security, before we tackle security, AI. We already have lots of AI solutions at the airports. For example, security, we already used to computer vision in terms of identifying objects, in terms of X-ray and access control. But what I want to set the scene here in terms of security, and it's just to I know it's controversial. One of the things that I think that will help a lot in terms of balancing security and then facilitation, it's the emotion detection technology. I know it's controversial, but I think it will help in terms of security and screening, and what to screen, what not to screen, what passengers to screen, and to identify threats. Another point that I think that we should talk about, of course, is the passenger experience in terms of implementing touchless experience, which with biometrics, I think that is already being used. And the last area, which is the one that we are focusing more in our airports, it's in terms of machine learning and trying to integrate all the systems. And what we are doing at Cabo Verde is trying to create a central system where every system that we have at the airports generate events. And what we do with those events is, from those events, we act. And not only we act, but the machine learning also acts on the events. And our first project that we're doing right now, based on this, is the integration between the AODB and our automated PA system. The idea behind is that every event in the AODB, like the aircraft has landed or the boarding is started, the event is sent to the PA system, and we can automate the PA announcements. So that is our first project. And the idea behind this is if you can leverage all the systems integration and having the events, every event in a central repository, it's I think it's the way to go in terms of trying to leverage machine learning and AI to make real-time decisions and to act upon that and to do predictions. And so this is what our experience right now. And thank you.
Thank you, Marion.
Maurice, thank you very much. It's Marlon, by the way, like Marlon Brando. But I'm probably the one with the least experience on airports. For 4 years now, we are working on a project called the Bags ID, applying computer vision and AI for baggage identification. And basically, that comes forth from a group of engineers that worked on a different project. But we looked at problems in the industry, in various industries, and we found that the aviation industry was pretty early actually with biometrics, applying AI, airlines that are doing that for example, dynamic pricing for tickets for the last 15 years already. And we figured out, okay, can we do the same at baggage? And how can we revolutionize the baggage handling industry? And that's actually what we did. And I will tell a little bit more about it today, together with the airports.
Okay, beautiful. So with that, and I'm going to set the additional framework. My philosophy has always been, when I look at technology and you build a framework around technology, when I can implement one piece of technology and it can satisfy a multitude of business ventures or business venues, then you have a very strong, viable product or viable solution to work towards. And for me, as I think I mentioned earlier, and we look at the customer or the passenger experience, and we realize that the customer is not just the passenger, it's also your internal customers as well, and feeding that support service arm. Looking at the revenue generation piece, because we as airports need to be able to do that. And then the efficiency side, and Marlon, that's where you come in on the back side, is making sure that we can actually deliver on baggage reconciliation, delivering the bag to the individual, such as dealing with IATA 753 and other business ventures. So let's deep dive a little bit into the AI framework. So if you look at some of our listening community, we talk about AI, and some may not know about AI. So Marlon, let's start with you. Tell me, exactly what is AI? And what does it fit into the framework of your business, and how we're looking to apply AI to the transportation sector within aviation?
We have seen beautiful things in the aviation industry. I've seen great examples in computer vision technology, or where AI was applied to improve certain processes. And let's go a little bit back, but it's a good example, I think. We have seen a lot of passenger biometrics being used for example, seamless passenger journeys, and that's pure AI working with cameras. And from a personal interest, there was this project that was called the Meer ID project. That's nothing to do with airlines, and that was how cameras were hidden in trap cams were hidden in the forest, and when a camera recognized the bear could be recognized, and they found out there were 76 bears. That example is actually fascinating. What happens, for example, now in the trial on Heathrow Airport is for a wildlife track and wildlife and endangered species recognizing them on an X-ray scan. So what they did, they built a database with all kinds of forms and objects that are typically for wildlife, so ivory, rhino horns, that kind of stuff. And I find it fascinating that a simple AI algorithm, a simple database, can be used to identify that on an X-ray scan. A typical thing on an airport, very successful on Heathrow Airport. But that was the X-ray image that was used, and I couldn't understand why a bag couldn't be identified based on its physical characters. So what we did, we tried to eliminate the bag tag, and we didn't understand why we still needed that bag tag. We didn't understand why there was an RFID chip needed, an expensive RFID chip needed. And if you take in consideration that approximately 50 million kilos of paper is used every single year for flying bags around the world, in our opinion, that should be done differently. And with that in mind, we thought, okay, if you can manage X-ray scans and you can identify objects on an X-ray scan, why can't we do that from the outside of a bag? So we started to photograph bags. We bought a lot of bags, and with cameras, we were able to capture a lot of images. And how it works with AI, it becomes better if you feed the data set, and that makes it better and better over time. And it's now on a level where it's so accurate, that's on the level of passenger biometrics. And this is a good example, I think, on how a computer can do something that wasn't possible a couple of years ago, and where all the airports and airlines can benefit from. But you need to pick your problem and build a solution around that, or the other way around. You have a great solution, and you start applying that to the industry. But what happens a lot, there's a lot of focus at airports and airlines on everything that a passenger can see, and baggage is not necessarily something that's, they need to do it, but it's not their first priority. But we have chosen baggage, and there's a lot possible here. But I'm 100% sure that Brian, Karen, and Victor can tell a lot about their AI solutions that they applied on their specific airports.
And that's a great intro, because I want to turn over to Victor now, because he mentioned video analytics and a little controversy to go along with that, especially dealing with this series of 7 airports to work with, and the audience realizing that mishandled bags, lost bags within our industry is over, I think, $3 billion a year, something like that. It's a large amount of money in regards to what it costs the industry. And from a customer satisfaction standpoint, not knowing that your bag is not there after you've had a 16, 18, 20-hour flight, the customer satisfaction level goes extremely low. So it doesn't matter how well the flight experience was, it's the experience, right? So
have you ever tried to fill in a PIR form if a bag is lost?
well, yeah,
That's a headache in itself.
Exactly, I've done it too many times. So Victor, you talk about that, and I want to apply it to your airport, and I also want to ask Karen the same thing. Looking at the technology, and you're looking at video analytics, as well as you talking about the bags and the customer experience, where does AI fit into the framework and the stream for you?
On our side, right now our focus is mainly on systems integration, where we implemented recently a new BRS system in the cloud. And again, what we can do is, by having a central system where every event of every system goes to, you can immediately act upon it. For example, like a lost bag or anything, it's different entities. So you have the handling company and you have the airport company. So the handling company has the BRS system, and of course the airport is the one that probably will give the authorization for pushback. And so you can try to integrate these systems, and the idea here is, if you have a centralized system with every event that happens, and this is really important, because when you talk AI or machine learning, you need data. It's data driven. But I think we can go a little bit further, which is event driven, because if you have event driven, then the machine learning is better. You can learn more. It's like Marlon said, that they had to photograph a lot of bags in terms of having the images to analyze. And I think if we go a little bit further with events, then you can like create the whole journey of the bag, and with that you can have more good information that you can leverage.
Okay, and Karen, I'd like to get your feedback and your input on that as well.
No, but I think that AI is something that will both be very important in terms of generating data, in terms of computer vision, getting the right data, both on events and on objects or things happening at the airport, both in an operational perspective and from the passenger's perspective. And we've also done trials and proof of concepts in the turnaround process, and it's very interesting to see how things can be collected in terms of information automatically through computer vision. So I think there's a lot to do, both in collecting and analyzing the data using AI, and I just see loads of different possibilities with it. So I think exciting times going forward.
Okay. So the question that comes into play, and we talk about data and data sharing, and Brian, I'd like your feedback on, when you're looking at gathering and harnessing data, there are multiple touch points within the ecosystem of data, and you have entities at times that don't want to share data. If you want to have an effective solution to that standpoint, how are you working towards getting that buy-in from your respective stakeholders to gather data, to be able to prove that there's this tangible benefit to be gained by integrating an AI solution?
Great question, Maurice. Absolutely, it's boiling it down to the most common denominator. First of all, when we go to our tenant base, or even the frontline staff, if we drop the bombshell of artificial intelligence, immediately it's kind of like lost in the conversation. Oh, wait a minute, that sounds highly technical. Well, it is, but let's make it simplified and easy to understand. So from a tenant base, yes, they're reluctant to share the information for competitive purposes. However, if we're looking at information that's readily available, such as that computer vision that's looking at a departure gate, and it's watching every serviceable element on that aircraft, again, that's readily available. Anybody can watch outside the window and see what's happening. So from that perspective, absolutely what Victor said, it's ingesting huge amounts of data that an individual couldn't possibly ingest and try to define what's happening, and using that machine learning to the benefit of an event-driven, again, back to Victor, an event-driven purpose that really helps support the operation. So with that computer vision that we're using on the gate right now, typically Some of our airlines are contracting their services out to a third-party provider. They don't necessarily, the airline doesn't necessarily have a representative, a boots on the ground. So from that perspective, we're now able to provide a direct computer feed from an existing camera network that, again, is using AI to show and demonstrate in real time exactly what's happening with that aircraft, what service elements have occurred, what haven't occurred, and what needs to be completed to make sure that aircraft leaves on time. Again, it's financial. So to go back to your question, go back to the tenants. While you might not necessarily be interested in sharing data, we're going to source data that we can collect on ourselves and demonstrate to you that we're invested in your brand, and absolutely helping our brand as well. So that healthy homogeny of working together absolutely should drive the technology.
So how are you working with stakeholder engagement? I look at that, I'm sure there's a challenge that sits across there, Victor and Karen, it being airport operators, and it's always that challenge. Remember the old adage of who owned the passenger, was it the airline or the airport, and that data sharing lack of, but you need that level of engagement to maximize the true benefits with AI framework. How are you getting the engagement with your respective airports and getting buy-in from your stakeholders?
I would say for us, absolutely, it goes back to brand, and it kind of speaks to that medium size and small size airport and hubs. From that perspective, again, a large amount of the services are contracted out. If the brand does not have boots on the ground and representative forces other than that third-party contract, who's looking out for that mutual brand? So just as important as the Delta name is, CVG's name is equally important. And as services are contracted out, who's really left holding and taking care of the customer? It's frankly becoming more and more on the airport side. So we're taking that assertive step, if you will, to really embrace that responsibility and no longer sit idly by and say, well, that's not really our contract with the consumer. It absolutely is our contract because we're representative of the tenants that are inside our facility footprint.
Victor, Karen, any comments?
Yeah, and in our case, it's we own 7 airports, and in between the airports, of course, we can leverage it, and we also own the handling company. So for us, that's a plus. But we're starting by like Brian said, we're starting by the ones that we can manage ourselves, like computer vision, like AODB or BRS, or even the PA system. The idea is we're going to start with what we can own the data. That is simple to get the data, and then of course, then we'll progress to the more difficult ones, if I can say, which is the stakeholders.
We also have some different situations with 10 different airports, some where we have our own ground handling and others where there are different actors at the airport. But I think a lot of it also, with the computer vision at least, it gives you a common vision of what's actually happening and a base to collaborate more across different players. So I think there are possibilities there. And also if you see like the queue measurement system making predictions, that's important for the customer experience, both manning up the right amount of security lanes, people and so on, and collaborating across all the different stakeholders to ensure the best possible passenger experience. So I think a lot of these things are also enablers to collaborate more, because you get better data, you get better predictions, you can discuss in a different manner around these things.
I actually think you're totally right, Karen, and it delivers tons of data. And we also need to look at it from a passenger perspective, because a passenger is flying from airport A to airport B, and if those airports are not collaborating, they're interrupting the passenger experience basically. So it all starts with airports collaborating or understanding what their role is to facilitate, for example, with computer vision, and facilitate airlines to produce or to enable services that they are that they can offer on every single airport. And that's actually one of the problems we are currently dealing with our airline clients. We need to do it on specific routes, because otherwise we can't do it. On another route, it's not working because there are not cameras enabled. So in order to get all the data and make sure that the whole journey is working, there needs to be some kind of collaboration here.
Okay, so I have a question for the general populace here and for you guys. Given the fact we talk AI, we talk about machine learning and some instances of BI in the past and seeing some of the conversations that I've had, why is it that it's only coming to fruition now? Why is it just being examined? Why looking at the adoption, considering the fact AI has been around for a while? Why is it taking so long to adopt to air transport industry, adopting this to the ATI? And I need your thoughts on it.
If I can answer that question from our perspective, image recognition is only on a level that it's better than the human eye since 2015, 2016. That's one element where image recognition became a force to reckon with. That's one thing. Computer power is the second thing. And today we are using cameras with amazing computer power on top of it. Companies like SICK and Cognax, they are delivering cameras that's mind-boggling what they can offer. And that combined and the calculation power to do real-time interpretation of what you're seeing, that wasn't possible a couple of years ago. That's very simple. And training in AI, training in neural network, that was quite difficult, but true, we are seeing it for a long time already. Again, if we are going back, for example, airlines that are using AI for dynamic pricing on tickets, it's there for the last 15 years. So computer vision here is a little bit different, but self-learning and machine learning is something from the last 5 years and has a lot to do with computer power.
And if I can add on Marlon, it's the cloud technologies and the cloud solutions that you
Absolutely.
The big game changer, because you're democratizing AI. You don't have to have the infrastructure for the AI algorithms because you have it in the cloud. So you can just apply it to your solutions and try and experiment. So it's easier now to try to experiment with computer vision and AI than it was before, because you would have to invest more in the beginning, and now you have the cloud solutions that help you with that.
Yeah, and every airport here has invested a lot in barcode readers or tag readers. A camera, an off-the-shelf camera, cost a fraction of a laser reader. So it's also more accessible here.
Exactly. That's to any technology. It's that maturation, right? Now it's much more accessible than what it ever was, and it's much more affordable than what it's ever been. So from that perspective, now the smaller players can absolutely jump into this space and leverage the technology.
Karen, you want to chime in, or you'll pass on this one?
No, but I think all of the aspects that been mentioned here are valid, and as Brian said, the development have been going on now, or you have said, multiple of you, development has been going on so that now it's getting to a point where it is more accessible, and it's a learning process also, I think, for the airports to understand where can we actually use this, where can it enable us to do things, and I think also with other solutions before, maybe in some cases, like a lot of talk about IoT and sensors and connecting things in other ways. And now maybe it's possible through computer vision to do the same things. For example, seeing if a bin is full or empty, and do we need to empty it? So getting those types of technology choices and growing into what can we actually do with that AI, it takes some time, I think.
So go ahead. I'm sorry, Marlon.
Go ahead.
All right. So based upon everything I'm hearing, then a lot of you have had some, I call them epiphanies, right? So you've had that aha moment that's come about and says, AI has some tangible benefit, but is it the panacea? Is it the cure-all to fix all? So you've had some successes and some failures. So have you benchmarked that, and what are some of the successes and some of the disappointments or the failures that you've experienced with AI? And let's leave costs off the table for a second, because we need to get back to cost, because data does cost money in storage, right? But let's talk about some of the application integration, application development, and what you've done and what worked and what hasn't worked. I apply to the fail fast principle rather than just spending money and running iterative solutions all day. So how has that been applicable? How have you applied that? And Brian, you're nodding your head, so I think you want to be the troublemaker for this one.
So absolutely, our failure started in robotics, and we definitely wanted to jump in. I would say, kind of back to the last question, one of the elephants in the room is potentially lack of staffing in the future. So what are we going to start doing to bridge the gap of labor? So from that perspective, we were concerned about the growing activity inside our airport and the lack of ability to actually clean the flooring. So we chased after robotics. Frankly, my home Roomba could do better than one of the major suppliers in the country. That we went ahead, trialed it, felt that it was successful enough, but it became a failure after failure after failure. So much so that it was actually a risk to the consumer. And that's a non-starter, as we all know. Of course, as we kind of alluded to it before too, absolutely our internal workforce is one of our biggest customers. We were losing their faith. So they were interested in trialing it, but very quickly started to feel as if, okay, well, again, this was all talk and it's not really reality. So we scrapped that program, went back to the drawing board, absolutely sourced throughout the world, found a vendor that was quite capable, brought them in, and that solution has been nonstop success from the outset. And frankly, that's AvidBots. So with their floor scrubber device, they were able to demonstrate not just computer vision, but absolutely that machine learning. And when we're talking about the machine learning in something as simple as a floor scrubber, what we had to teach AvidBots about is you do realize there's really kind of a security sentry inside this bot. Because as it's going around, if it sees something that wasn't originally mapped at the one-time mapping, it starts to educate itself. And the more it educates itself, it knows, well, that wasn't there yesterday. So it becomes an if-then statement. So if it wasn't there yesterday, but it's here today, I go around it. If I go back tomorrow and it's still there, then does that become part of my mapping? Now, it's not a far extrapolation to say, well, from that perspective, again, how about an unattended baggage? Could the bot see an unattended bag and alert authorities, event-driven, alert authorities that there's an unattended bag and have that bot stop and basically monitor the scene just as we would expect of any badge holder. So again, tremendous opportunities out there. Yes, wholeheartely agree, fail fast, fail forward. And it's really kind of taking some teeth gnashing along the way and some arm twisting, but by gosh, solutions can work. And it's really being tenacious at it to make sure that you see it all the way through.
Yeah, from our side, we're a small country with limited resources, so we're just starting AI now because it's more accessible. Because if it was before, it would be difficult to try to implement and fail. But now with the cloud solutions that we see on the market, we see that there's an opportunity there, and a cheap opportunity even if you fail. So for us, it's the cloud is the only way, and as long as we have solutions in the cloud that you pay for what you use and pay as you go, that's the way that we're going to try to achieve some leveraging from AI and machine learning.
Okay, so with that, then am I then hearing that looking at cloud-based solutions, working with cloud providers like an AWS or Azure or anyone else in an AI type solution, are we saying then that there's a potential for having AI as a service, integrate that with the cloud solution, and you can actually ramp up an AI instance and integrate that into your airport more rapidly or within your business model more rapidly?
Wholeheartedly. And we'll use our use case on the curb front. Again, COVID, consumers in the domestic US are coming back far rapidly than what was originally anticipated. It's predominantly leisure. The leisure demographic isn't necessarily familiar with the ins and outs of an airport. So again, the curb front becomes very complex and frankly congested. So what do airports typically do? Well, we try to resolve that through human interference or human intervention with a public service or public safety agent. What we decided to do is, again, leverage the cloud, leverage our partners at Amazon Web Services with their computer vision programming, And ultimately, we're looking at vehicles, how long they've been in one particular position, have they moved and just, again, created another position. And it's actually sending a picture and the time length to a wearable device with our agents. Now, pre the device, our agents would often get into arguments, which is never a good thing for the consumer. However, when you show them a picture of their vehicle and it shows a timestamp, that argument very quickly fritters away. And that was just a very quick deployment in less than about 2 months of simply using an existing camera, dropping the program on there, working with our partner at TaskWatch for the cloud upload and the subsequent download to the wearable, and boom, we were in business. So it can be done and can be, quite frankly, very financially affordable.
Yeah, just to add, that's the way we think also. Like Brian, the idea here is we have a small team, so we're right now prioritizing the event-driven solution, so to try getting events and machine learning. But our next step is trying to make the cloud computer vision solutions and try to integrate it with our already cameras. Most of our cameras don't have AI algorithms in them, so the idea is to try to leverage the computer vision algorithms from probably Amazon or Google Cloud or some other cloud, and try to make it as accessible as possible.
So with that, Brian, but that product that you implemented, granted you ramped up very quickly, so you can actually define the parameters for dwell time, et cetera. It used to be if whether it's 5, 10, 15 minutes. You also have the ability, I'm assuming, then to segment not rental cars, hotel shuttles, because they have a longer time. They can dwell more than regular vehicles. So you're able to differentiate between the two and go through and not impede the business process, correct?
Completely, and that's the beauty of this type of technology, right? So what started off as just a passenger vehicle very quickly escalated into, oh, wait a minute, we didn't realize how often we actually have charter buses showing up on our curb front when they're actually supposed to be in a different location. So what is it? Is it our wayfinding that's failing? Is it just a lack of awareness in general? So we learned a significant amount there from jumping from that passenger vehicle to a large charter bus, and then subsequently the other services that park on our curb front. So very quickly, we've morphed into now, what are we doing overall for traffic management in addition to the security aspect? So it's the gift that frankly keeps on giving.
Wow, there you go. But Karen, I look at you as being in your airport, being a creative and an innovative airport. Some of the applications that you've applied to AI, what are some of the tangible benefits that you've received out of that you've shared with your business partners, stakeholders, or even with other airports?
I think one thing that we've been working on and we will continue work with is computer vision in the turnaround process to enable the event-based timestamps of different events during the turnaround process. And I think there we see both the advantage of punctuality and getting the planes off on time if we can early on identify in an event that hasn't started before it's too late. So collaborating once again between different stakeholders, giving an image of what's actually going on, what is the status of the different turnarounds at different stands, and how can we both optimize the process but also ensure that we act in real time when something isn't going according to plan. So that's one example where I think there's a lot of advantages with the computer vision and sharing it among different stakeholders.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess an add-on to that, and I want to tie in Brian and Victor with that one. I mean, an airline is not really generating revenue unless that aircraft is in the air. So you have a minimal standard of some sort, whether you're working with a large carrier or even an ultra low-cost carrier or even a low-cost carrier. And are you using this technology then to ensure that you can use this data, use this technology to ensure that you can get maximum throughput from your gates and ensure maximum turnaround time for the aircraft? And are you sharing that with the airlines?
For sure, on our side, we're just on the cusp of really starting into the gate management aspect, using existing cameras and again, dropping in a program on there. Maurice, absolutely to your point, there's an entry level, service level agreement, if you will, that we can start really engaging in. Were you on that gate? How long were you on that gate? What's the fee for that gate? And do you start morphing beyond a preferred gate use and truly into that common use platform? And it's charged as a service. So it's almost like an iterative step into an airport as a service, ironically. So from that perspective, yes, we need to make sure that our tenants are very effective and very efficient from flying their aircraft. But then also, what are we doing? And we talked about this pre-call. What are we doing on the sustainability side of the house? So with this new technology, absolutely, we can be looking at that aircraft from ground power plug-in to potentially a heat signal off of the APU exhaust. We can determine whether that aircraft was actually using ground power or not, and immediately parlaying that information directly back to our tenant carriers on how much fuel did you use or did you not use, and fuel either one of the most expensive or second most expensive cost of an airline. They're very interested in how they can save aviation fuel as best as possible. So again, that jump into something as simple as we're trying to save you fuel immediately starts speaking to carbon emissions, carbon offsets.
And one area from AI excels is planning, and what we're trying to do here by having all the information from the ODB or from the slot management systems. One person can go to a flight, for example, a flight that is delayed. He can go to the flight records or the flight number and see, okay, this flight normally has about around 70% of passengers. He can act upon that in terms of changing the gate because the flight is delayed or anything. But he can do it for one flight, but not for 1,000. And that's where AI comes into the scene, because AI can go through all that data and say, okay, this flight here, you can change it without having that impact or this impact in the planning on the operations.
From the audience, I think, Brian, there's conflicting points of view that may come along with this. But as an add-on, and I think, Victor, you started this when you came up with the cloud AI integration, and then I need some input here, guys. In regards to using cloud and computer vision, have you seen or do you consider potential for latency being a problem?
In our case, absolutely not. We are using an infrastructure, of course, from Azure in this case. But we are also using an on-premise solution. It's called on the edge devices on our arches. So there's no latency here, and it needs to be a redundant system, and it needs to be up and running all the time. So we can't have that. One other point I would like to bring up was what Brian was saying. If you can show the immediate profit or efficiency advantage for an airline, then it changes the game. I give you a very simple example. If we take an image of a bag, we also extract the dimensions of a bag. And if you extract the dimensions of a bag, you can basically run an algorithm how you play Tetris with a container. And that's the role of the airport as well, to facilitate that and make big improvements there. So everything goes hand in hand here, and we all need to learn. And I'm dealing with some airlines that basically want to do a lot, but the airports need to facilitate the infrastructure. And to Brian's point, you need to point out what the benefits are. And from a sustainability aspect, there's a lot to win as well. Also in the baggage area, a lot more.
So Maurice, the latency, absolutely, yes, we're concerned about it. Contractually, we of course have very significant SLAs with teeth in them to make sure that doesn't happen. And really it comes back to redundancy. Our two partners are AWS and Azure, very well known, very well structured, frankly, and they understand our commitments to cloud. So it goes hand in hand. We can't have a productive, effective solution if we can't have a reliable product. So just from its most basic, those organizations very much understand that, and frankly, are more interested in partnering how deep can we push the envelope in some of this technology? So beyond the redundancy, very much we've tried to move away from on-prem, trying to reduce our overall cost, and of course, reducing costs for our tenant carriers as a result of reduced overhead. And then ultimately, we're back into parlaying that into the consumer. One of the elements that we very much are trying to pursue is it goes back to that exceptions-based event. So we ought not be looking like the traditional AOC at just streams of video and trying to figure out what might be happening. Whereas if we're educating the computer system in that machine learning, now it's telling us exactly what the exception is, and ideally it's taking course corrective measures. So it's not necessarily a far leap to think about a gate management tool that sees that the fueler is missing. The fuel is about 13,000 pounds. It's going to take X minutes, and that's going to be longer than the aircraft departure time. So immediately, I'm calling the fueler, automated service, and notifying the customer we're at a 20-minute delay, and perhaps we give them a coupon to a local concessionaire. So again, it's coming full circle of pulling the entire ecosystem into the mix to come up with, frankly, a viable solution that just improves the overall efficiency, effectiveness, and enjoyableness of airports and airlines.
So what I'm actually hearing then, I mean, the key operational word here, no matter however you look at it, is collaboration. So if I don't have that collaborative engagement with all of your stakeholders, and even the instance that you just made, Brian, if the fueling truck is not there, if the caterer is not there, if the wing workers aren't there, then you can have the best on-time arrival, but if someone's stuck up on their aircraft and can't get to a gate for another 30, 45 minutes, it's the worst flight ever. If an individual can't board the aircraft to have an on-time departure, it's still going to be the worst flight ever. The passenger experience just got impacted. With that, and looking at the advent of all this technology that comes about, and every time you implement technology, it also comes with a level of risk. And it also comes with some other potential for vulnerability that may come along with that. So as you looked at your AI solutions and you looked at evaluating AI, did you examine some of the potential risks that may come along with that, and what types of risk mitigation measures have you put in place? And Karen, I'd like to start with you, and then whip around the room, guys.
I think there are different risks involved, and I think where should I start here? I think one aspect that we have been discussing, and we have not come all the way in the discussion, but it's in terms of ethics. It's you can do a lot of things with AI, but what do we actually want to do, and what is in line with our policies and what the type of company we want to be? So that's something that I think it's valid for a lot of use of different technologies, but I think it's a very, very important point for AI, and something that we will continue to look at. I think there are, of course, other types of risk. One risk that we have seen is as we also mentioned here, around collaboration, but it's also around ways of working. It's getting the people who actually need to act on the information, or actually need to trust the information, to have that kind of confidence in the solution, in the AI, to take it on and use it. Because that's something that we also seen is like, okay, if you don't understand how it actually works, can I trust it? How should I use this type of information, and so on. So I think it's a lot of education and communication also surrounding AI solutions, to get the right ways of working and getting it really to be a part of the operations.
I can go. You can go first, Brian. Okay.
Brian's inching at the bit here.
So Victor was leaning in, so I was going to yield the floor. Karen, absolutely, and thanks for saying the ethics piece. We frankly have steered clear of facial recognition, very sensitive topic in the US, and something that we don't feel as if we should be on the blazing front end of that. It's just not the appropriate time. So from that perspective, we are interested in biometrics overall. What other forms of biometrics, and there are at least 16, what other forms of biometrics can we be leveraging, again, on behalf of the consumer? And then you start jumping into well beyond the computer vision and the AI components of, what about the blockchain element? And as a consumer, can I select, 3 bits of biometrics that confirms who I am, confirms what my itinerary is and what my services requests are. And then immediately after that, those 3 identifying elements are evaporated. And no one's in control of that particular information, again, in interest of protecting the consumer. And the other thing, frankly, Maurice, has been storytelling. It's kind of an old-fashioned, how do you boil this technology down to the most understandable format and demonstrate in real time that this has value? And I think we were discussing this before, immediately the thought process is, oh, if it's technology, it must be incredibly expensive. Why would we ever go there? And it's making an investment on the front end of more affordable technology. It's leveraging partnerships that are interested in that collaboration and creating new products and services. And then that last element is, how do you leverage it for commoditization? Can it be marketed to other airports? Can it be taken to other industries? And frankly, what can you do internally to maximize your revenue sources, perhaps on the concession side? So there's no lack of storytelling, but you really have to have that narrative nailed pat in order to gain the influence and the trust in that product.
Yeah, I think the privacy is the main concern. And like I gave the example of emotion detection. It facilitates in terms of security and analyzing and profiling passengers and to see which passengers it's nervous or stressed out. But then it comes to technologies that are sometimes biased or sometimes are reading information that the passenger probably doesn't want to share. So privacy is one of the main risks and concerns that we need to tackle. The other one, of course, is in terms of, if we're looking at the cloud, we have to look at the infrastructure. Is it resilient? Is it redundant? What happens when you have a blackout on a data center? So yeah, that we need to analyze and to have measures in place to make sure that if we have some source of those types of problems, we need to have a fallback plan.
Marlon, you're leaning forward, so it's all yours.
I'm not leaning forward, but I'm actually surprised that the airports here point out the privacy issue. I think it goes hand in hand with security, and you guys have taken security to a whole different level. If I want to fly, I need to give my salary, how many times I've been to another country, 300 stamps, all the way up. And I think it's also realistic here, if all the airports are working towards a seamless journey, first of all, we need to gather data. And to make an interpretation of that data, to make sure that we can offer a seamless journey, is a totally different story. But I find it, of course, privacy. It's also with BagsID a very important element. We do not store passenger data, for example. We only connect. But privacy as the main concern for AI here is from an airport perspective, in my opinion, a little bit, strange. And I'll put it mildly.
Brian, before you do that, because I think I've engaged a lot in this over the last couple of years. My rule of thumb has also been, Marlon, as you look at other airports, when you've seen one airport, you've only seen one airport. There's no such thing as a cookie cutter that will fit my airport, Brian's or Karen's. So there's some airports that sit within the US today that facial comparison, I would not say facial recognition, facial comparison is just not allowed in the airport. Do you have some airports that, and I call it just from an analytics perspective or from a security perspective, it has to be limited to how I apply it. So I'm looking at the bag, I'm looking at what Brian may be wearing, but I'm not looking at Brian's face. I'm looking at a male in a suit and a nice yellow tie. I'm trying to isolate it to that level to ensure from a data privacy perspective and the privacy perspective of the traveling public that that's being adhered to. On the European side for you, and I was quite surprised, is that you still have GDPR issues as well that have to contend with that. And we're subjugated to that to have to deal with that, and there are fines and penalties that come along with that. So we need to have then opt-in solutions. So now how do you integrate opt-in solutions within the AI framework as well. And there lies the rub as we want to enhance this within our airports. And given the fact that traditional brick and mortar is not going to fix our transportation issues, so we need tech to make that happen. So how do we go about doing that?
But if we take, for example, Brian Kopp, you gave the example of the unattended bag. Why didn't you, is there a possibility to identify the bag? Who does it belong to? And it's quite interesting that if you put a backpack on a suitcase right now, all the information is on it. Name, first name, everything is on it. So if we're talking about privacy, I would like to have a discussion about that, because it's measuring with two different points here.
It is, and frankly, let's face it, it's confusing for the consumer too. So
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Unfortunately, we're at the mercy of the nation states for deciding sometimes what security levels are implemented, not necessarily with a tremendous amount of consultation. And frankly, in the States, we're very limited by Customs and Border Protection, because the only thing they have is your face. So from the start, it's facial recognition for the US government, where airports, and Maurice, you certainly answered it eloquently of, well, perhaps, again, this goes back to the different forms of biometric. Well, maybe I'm interested in finding the outline or what the individual is wearing, which we certainly can do today, or the gait, or some other measure other than facial comparison or facial recognition. Instead of this kind of nation state, well, this is what we're doing and we're full steam ahead. So ultimately, it's trying to create alternative solutions, ideally compressing. And if we compress from both sides in an airport, where's the center? Well, it's that security checkpoint. So hopefully we start driving different conversations in that environment.
But I think in the end, a passenger wants to have a completely worry-free journey on an airport. He arrives with his car, and most ideally he walks directly to the aircraft. That's the most ideal world. But there are a lot of hurdles in between that, yeah, in an ideal world, it can be solved with cameras. And if we are worrying about a lot of privacy issues, and we don't compare that with the way we are using them today, I think we lose sight on what the ideal scenario here will be, and if it will ever be that it will be very seamless. But basically, it's up to you. I hear the airlines talking about that. That's something they want to do, make it as convenient for passengers as possible. But there are a lot of obstacles in the way, and I'm wondering how you guys are seeing this.
Well, do we take a page out of the GDPR playbook or some of the other US states that have implemented something similar? What does that come down to? It comes down to consumer preference. If I don't want the information shared, I know that I'm going to be limited on what I potentially could do.
Yeah.
So there are basically mechanisms, control mechanisms that as a consumer I can leverage to make sure that my data is not improperly used. Is that fully refined yet? I think we can all agree, probably not. But certainly GDPR was that salvo that says, yeah, we've got to get control of this and put it back into the hands of the consumer. Which
and so what I see from some suppliers when they say they are GDPR compliant, basically what they I don't know if it's Marlon, it's your case, they are not storing the data, the passenger data, in terms of the images and everything. And probably that might be a solution to go to it. Okay, we do the analysis for what we need to make the decision, but we don't keep the data. And probably that is one of the solutions that you can overcome the GDPR or something like that.
Well, I think from a GDPR perspective, I think what has transitioned, especially within the North American front, and I could be mistaken, and Brian, you can correct me, and I'm not sure what Karen, what you guys look at, but traditionally with most applications that you see today, you're already in, or you've already opted in, and then you subsequently need to opt out because you no longer want to share your data. And most of us within the user community are not aware of that. So now your data is being transitioned and transported across the entire ecosystem, and you never requested that. But by using a product, you opted, when you signed the dotted line and you started using that product, you said, share my data, and my data is gone. And that's where the problem originated. So now, if you get to the point where you opt in. So I want to opt in, and now I want to be able to track my bags. I want to engage in looking at the whole, where did my bag go in the bag journey, but I engaged in that. So now you're saying, you vendor, you Marlon, you airport, I'm allowing you to have that opportunity to make sure that you can fulfill my journey. And when I'm done, I want you to close this transaction and make that go away. And then at one time it did not sit that way. So how do you find a way then, and that's where the balance needs to come into play, that we can leverage this technology, make it and bring that to the consumer to say, yes, I'm okay with this for a portion, or I'm willing to share a portion of my data to ensure that my journey is a successful one in what I define to be a success. And I govern my journey from end to end.
Yeah. In the case of Bags ID, and I think we need to define two things here, is that AI, which is applied to pure business-to-business services or to passenger services. I think that those are two different paths as well.
Right.
But in the case of Bags ID, we on purpose decided not to store any passenger data. So we just create a virtual LPN. And that's exchanged with, for example, BHS systems or DCS systems, where it's owned by the airline. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the moment you want to opt in for a service, I think there are a lot of hurdles that can be taken away with the usage of AI. And I hear a lot of airports and airlines that are saying, okay, we want to improve this, improve that. And there are two things. There's this new products, and there's also improving existing products, for example, turnaround times and that kind of stuff. And the thing we need to decide on, in my opinion, and that airports need to decide on, okay, what will be required from an airport? What kind of data do we want to use? And the second phase is how are we going to store it? And how can we learn from it? And how can we extract predictive data out of it? And what I'm seeing with the airlines I'm currently talking to is everybody think it's my client, the passenger is my client, and the airport thinks it's my client, and OTA thinks it's their client, TSA is thinking it's their client. So the whole spectrum here is very fragmented, and that's worrying me as well, because if there's no collaboration there, and I'm not even talking about airports that needs to collaborate, but also the stakeholders at an airport. It doesn't make sense to come up with every individual AI solution. We need to do this as a collective, where the passenger is in the middle. We need to think as the passenger and how we can improve the passenger, and that's for where the passenger is part of this whole discussion. But there are a lot of B2B solutions where I can think of where AI can play a role. But especially there where the passenger is, I think we should focus on more collaboration and more standards and initiatives that are going beyond different. I would say, Karen, that Swedavia and Avinor and for example, Frankfurt Airport and Schiphol Airport, they all need to work together to make this journey working. I think that's, for me, one of the biggest challenges that the industry is facing.
Well, I think one of the challenges, you're right from that discussion has been an ongoing one for industry for the longest while. From a collaborative perspective, it's like with mobile apps, everyone has one, but you can't have 5 million airports on a mobile app. So how can I have one data storage point? So if I want to go to Brian's airport, I could just download it, look at it, do what I need to do, complete my journey. I'm going to Karen's airport, if I'm going to Victor's airport, and do that at one time. So how do we actually get to that point of that data sharing within the whole ecosystem? And I think we talked about that earlier, and I think that it's worthy of some additional discussion in maybe another forum, because as we look at the amount of airports and our system of airports, and as I mentioned earlier, in 2019, we moved over 4 billion people. And it was projected that we're supposed to move 8 billion people again at some point in time. So this collaboration, this collaborative effort is necessary within our environment. And you're going to do it with tech. You're not going to do it with traditional brick and mortar. So this AI component plays an integral part. And collaborate amongst ourselves as airports, as we integrate with airlines and ground handlers and all of our distinct stakeholders and business partners. So that becomes a challenge. I do want to segue real quick, because I do have one quick question for Marlon. Someone posed, when you're using AI for luggage, are you considering, or is using smart contracts, blockchain, considered in automating the cost of shipping the luggage or reuniting the luggage back with the passenger for, let's say, a mishandled bag or a lost piece of luggage?
That's something we don't do. We can track where the bag has been, but we will inform the airline who's responsible for that. So that's not in our domain. Our domain is just making sure that BagsID identifies the bag with all the solutions that come up with it. But we need to provide that information in the best way possible to the airlines or the airports, to make the passenger journey as pleasant as possible, even when a bag is mishandled. And there's a lot to win there, because with 4 billion passengers, still we had 30 million bags that were lost, 28 million bags that were mishandled. There's a lot to win here.
So let's talk about your AI strategy. So from all of you, how did you come up with your AI strategy? And is it working well for you? And what's the future of AI for you as you move forward within in this environment? It's everybody. But no one else. Go ahead.
We established under our innovation group basically 4 verticals: transport, connect, clean, and secure. For us, that vertical of connect really falls and speaks to AI. What is AI trying to do? And essentially everything we discussed here, it's connecting, it's that connective tissue of data that's not necessarily readily noticeable or understandable. We're trying to leverage that newer technology to really try to get an answer. So again, under that connect vertical for us, it's been a tremendous amount of explaining and frankly, a cultural shift to help people understand technology is not your enemy. Technology is not necessarily unaffordable. It's just another form of change management. So if you're not trying to do better than what you did yesterday, then perhaps you're missing out on improving your product, improving your brand name, and improving your, frankly, revenue stream or financial positioning. So going back to this technology in particular, what is it that we're doing to become more efficient, not only for us, but also for our tenant base?
For us, it's basically efficiency and automation. If you want to automate as much as possible. And we started with that in terms of integrating systems, and AI is the next step. After integrating, AI is the next step in decision-making, in leveraging process, and in machine learning. So it's a one pathway to heaven.
Definitely. Karen?
Oh, for us as well, it's a journey towards increased automation at the airport, but also a part. I once heard someone not saying artificial intelligence, but amplified intelligence, and the way that man and machine can collaborate. So the collaborative intelligence that we can achieve if we use the AI as a decision support and work together with that kind of intelligence, and in that way optimizing the airport. So I think also the optimization, efficiency, and increased automation is some key parts in AI moving forward.
Marlon?
Our complete company is built on an AI future. So basically, we are working on a project. We are working on getting as many airports BagsID enabled and get as many cameras on the bags as possible. And we are working closely with the bigger airlines to get this done. Last year, we won the Hangar 51 accelerator. We were selected. That's extended. So IAG Group is now also going to see if they can make sure that their 105 destinations are fully equipped with cameras, so we can run our algorithms and we can keep eyes on the bag in the whole journey. And they are not the only airline that is willing to do so. So we are hopefully to make some big announcements this year on how we're going to do that.
Okay. Now, question for you. I've heard H51, but for the audience, what is H51?
Oh, sorry. Hangar 51 is the innovation program of IAG Group, which is the holding company behind the British Airways and Iberia Aer Lingus. We run a test with them on Madrid-Barajas Airport to see if we would be able to track a bag and recognize a bag in the best way possible, and let the AI do the working. And that was actually so good that they extended the whole project also into 2022. With the ultimate goal on implementing the technology on their 105 routes they are flying to. And that will open a complete new array of services and efficiency for them. So we are hoping that not only IAG is going to do this, but also other airlines. And in basis, airlines airports need to facilitate this to many airlines, and airlines are need to share their information based on all the airports they are flying to, and that's where they need to collaborate as well. And obviously, IAG understand that project.
Okay. To the audience, if there are any questions, please get them to Ali, and she'll be definitely route them to me so I can reach out to our panel. We have roughly about 10 minutes left, plus or minus in our session, so we're definitely open for any questions that you may have. But I want to look at, and we've been talking about AI and talking about machine learning and just harnessing all of this data. Some of the other emerging technology that have been sitting out there as well, i.e. blockchain, and some of the others that have not really resonated well, but it's still sitting out there. Do you see that there is a future for integration with these types of technologies together to actually enhance the ecosystem of our airports as well as the transportation industry?
Are you asking me, or?
I'm asking. If I'm allowed to participate in the panel, I'm going to start answering the questions as well. But I was told I was supposed to or not, so it's up to Brian right now. It's up to the four of you.
I wanted to point out on blockchain, because it's a new technology that we should look in, and especially in the seamless passenger journey travel and exchanging information between the stakeholders. And Marlon mentioned one thing that is very important for AI, which is the business-to-business side of it. It's easier to implement the AI solutions to business, and adapting that with blockchain to make sure you protect the data from the passenger. I think it's one probable solution that will help in terms of leveraging computer vision or even some other sorts of AI machine learning.
I wholeheartedly agree on the passenger side. Does that offer us, with that smart contract capability, the opportunity to jump into smart biometrics? But then also the element that many of us should not forget is our cargo friends. So smart contracts in the cargo world absolutely make sense. How do we streamline that? If you talk about somewhat of a disarray in where the package is, cargo is very ripe for trying to improve that product. And again, ironically, where do airports play in that space? Right now, we're really kind of facilitating because we have the land. But is that something that we partner up amongst airports globally to try to improve? How do we find the package and let the consumer know exactly where the package is en route to them? Especially in the day and age of e-commerce. E-commerce is here to stay, all post things COVID. So we're certainly learning on an aggressive, assertive, and very fast scale on certainly what blockchain could mean. And then we can't also deny the fact that crypto is very much a thing. Despite some nation states, it's going to be around for a period of time. So we better figure out how to adapt and adopt.
I think in in terms of different technologies, I think it's always key to be able to integrate. We talked about APIs earlier. I mean, we will both receive information, share information, and analyze information in different ways. So we need to be able to connect those different dots of information in a way that it makes sense and that it creates value. And I also think that talking about, for example, we are working on autonomous PSPs to do the snow removal at our airports, and there 5G coming up, those sort of communication protocols will also have an important role going forward and give new opportunities.
All right. So a couple of things, and I was kind of surprised in the majority of our conversation when we looked at it, and we looked at the terminal operation side of, or the terminal portion of the airport, and we looked at business, and we also talked about airside. But we realized as we were going through our pandemic stages and just trying to have our airports operate, cargo was our lifesaver. So to not put an emphasis in looking at technology as well as AI within the cargo space, did we lose out on an opportunity to engage in some potential AI solutions? Granted, be some immature items sitting out there, immature applications sitting out there. There is one product I believe Belgium has, and I think Atlanta's looking at some other airports, what's called a cargo community system, which is a large engagement of integrating all of your stakeholders sitting on blockchain. And there's some tangible benefits to be gained, but why have we not even looked at AI within the cargo arena, considering the fact of where it's been? Because we're getting back to normal, and I hope we're not considering or discounting, not engaging on the cargo side and building our cargo infrastructure for our cargo partners as well, because that's been the lifeblood. And realize one thing, cargo does not talk back to you.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's why cargo hasn't been a focus, right? Packages don't complain necessarily. But as we all grow in responsibility, and just talked to our friends at ACI today, working on a paper about diversification for airports that don't necessarily have cargo today, how can they get into that cargo mix in the future? If you start thinking about drone traffic, light loads, absolutely GA airports, small airports very quickly could find themselves playing in that cargo space. What are they going to be able to do to really try to facilitate that? And in our situation, knowing that Amazon now, this is their global hub, we absolutely have to understand the impact on e-commerce and making sure that CVG never has a black eye as a result of not getting packages to where they need to be.
Anyone else?
On our side, cargo is not one of our main priorities. We are mainly a tourist destination. So, but yeah, being in the west coast of Africa and probably now with cargo being one of the saviors of aviation, yeah, I think we can probably start looking at it and to see how we can leverage it. But for now, it's not been our main focus. It's more on the operation side. And one thing that we didn't touch, of course, is the commercial part of it, the passenger side. In terms of commercial, what we do in AI, in terms of targeted advertising and everything. And that's when we're looking at also in terms of IoT. And of course, we go back to the GDPR part of it. But if we can leverage the passenger information from shopping and for everything, then we can leverage the revenues from aeronautical.
Spoken like a true capitalist, Victor. You and I can get along very well when it comes to generating revenue and marketing and advertising, definitely. I have two additional questions to throw into you. We talked about blockchain and integrating that with AI, but from a blockchain perspective, and I mean, some entities like CETA has done their sandbox in which there's blockchain instances sitting out there that you can play with data and looking at blockchain apps. And then we've done some at our airport. But why is it that blockchain itself hasn't actually matured or just taken flight, so to speak, within the airport space? And do you think it ever will?
It will. I think it's a timing issue, right? It's a technology maturation. First of all, people need to understand what blockchain is exactly. It means so many different things to pretty much every individual. So from that perspective, and Maurice, I know, Miami certainly leads the way in many elements from that perspective. It's really understanding from many of our aviation partners, what are you dabbling in? What are you looking at? And where can we potentially collaborate, partner up, and try to figure out, is there something here to chase after on a much larger scale?
Anyone else? Because I think, Marlon, this is applicable as well. We look at this whole blockchain perspective and applicability. Yeah, what you're doing with the IAG group is similar to what I did with flight chain data with myself, Heathrow, and Geneva, just tracking flight and make sure flight information was uniquely transparent across all platforms, and it worked out well. Is there some level of applicability then? Is there a future for blockchain on the backside?
Yeah, we have looked into it, but it was definitely not something that could add value on short term for us. It was also not necessary. But I do see that blockchain is a highly underestimated by a lot of people, and there was a lot of focus on just one single usage of blockchain. We missed that part a little bit. And I would also like to throw up another discussion, for example, RFID in the baggage space. That's also not picking up. And that's for a reason as well. Because it was expensive, because airlines didn't want to do it, airports didn't want to facilitate it. So there are many aspects that come into place before there's some mass adoption industry-wide. And that same goes for blockchain, actually, or Hyperledger, or whatever.
Maurice,
what would trigger the adoption, though? Go ahead, Brian. But add to that, what would trigger the adoption? It's similar to like when you had your ATM card that you go to a bank to get cash out. It took a while for people to adopt it. Everyone actually wanted to go into a bank, get in line, and wait to get money out. It's like, wow, there's an ATM. I could just go punch my pin and keep on. So what are we not doing, or what are we not engaging? How are we not bringing that information forward?
I would say it's that first mover. You know, speaking as an airport, just as you said before, you've seen one airport. We do not necessarily effectively work well together en masse to demonstrate to our airline partners how we can work significantly better in a different fashion. I go back to your comment on apps. You know, airports have tried apps to some varying degree of success. The consumer predominantly goes back to the airline app, but the airline only has the segment from check-in to pretty much bag retrieval. The airports are the ones that could have information all the way to the driveway. So what value information do we have? Value data sets that we have that we can start plugging in APIs and offering that to our airline partners, either in a commoditized fashion or an improved fashion for good, better, best level of services. And what is it that we can do jointly to generate additional streams of revenue that don't exist today? But it takes first movers to figure out what pieces do we have that are value add to our airline partners.
Or is there an ACI who could take a role there to force that kind of collaboration? Because they will probably miss the boat if we can only. So somebody needs to spark that.
And ACI taking a role. I'm sorry, when you say ACI taking a role, I want to get back to that, but go ahead, Victor, please.
No, I was just going to add, and Karen mentioned it in terms of APIs, and the way I look at it, the suppliers also need to get into this in terms of leveraging APIs and having APIs. And today, most of the suppliers, they don't have most of the systems with APIs to do a seamless integration. So that would have to be an investment. And every time we talk about investing, then it starts to be more difficult to leverage this.
And there are vendors.
Why don't we do this then?
There are vendors too that are trying to charge for your own data, which is mind-boggling. So that's like a non-starter for us.
Exactly.
So quick question. So why is it that when we write our tenders or we write our RFPs, or we engage with any vendor providing a service to our airports, let's say for Marlon, if you're going to provide a service to our airport, you must be able to provide us the data or create an API to ensure that we have the data and put that into your contracts. So now we have accessibility to the data. It's public information as it sits. It's not proprietary in any nature. So why are we not doing that at the bare minimum? So in any event, if Marlon wants to say, I want to be able to track a bag, I want to look at a bag to be able to provide maximum benefit to all of our system of airports with an open API, and there's an API store that ACI has. If you grab that data and say, here you go, from an AI perspective, yes, your bag's going to make it. It's raining in Miami. our largest carrier has a 56% on time ratio. Whatever the case may be, the predictability is, will the bag make it to the end destination? If not, you let the passenger know it may not be there, but your comfort level is, Brian, with your app, go have a coffee or a sandwich on the next flight, your bag will be there, enjoy yourself. Some of these things in the entire system, if we want to be about the intelligence of integrating AI across the entire ecosystem, we need to look at the entire journey. What is it that comprises or makes the journey?
But before we answer that question, I would like to emphasize that's exactly how BagsID did it. We are completely API driven. We only charge for API calls on our platform. And the only thing an airport needs to do is buy some relatively cheap equipment to get eyes on the camera, eyes on the bags, a camera on the back. And that is for a fraction of the cost. And that's how we facilitate the whole spectrum. So end-to-end back journey is fully API. I can't see a way how we do that differently.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of the new vendors, it's easier to have open API. And Maurice, like you mentioned, the idea is to have the tender with the requirements for open API. But then again, sometimes we have some legacy systems, and I'm not talking only about us. We have the police and the airlines, and that is the difficult part, because those vendors will try to sell you all the investment and try to charge for it. And that if we want to integrate blockchain and to share information between the stakeholders, then the vendors need to pitch in a little bit also.
But there are also the usual suspects who are also always the vendors at the airports. It's relatively difficult for a newcomer to access this market. So you have to collaborate with the bigger BHS players or software players, and look at how in some cases it's actually monopolized. If you look at the barcode at the LPCs, it's completely monopolized, and that makes it a little bit different as well. And for them, there's no reason to change it, because it makes them gazillions of money.
That is a very true statement. Karen, you were going to say something before you went back to me.
No, it was just a reflection regarding Brian mentioned first mover and the complexity of the industry, and it's true that when it comes to innovation and new technology, even for the passengers, there are different preferences and different maturity levels or tech readiness of the passengers. So we see some want biometrics, some doesn't, some want to use a mobile application, some doesn't, and so on. So in terms of implementing and integrating new technologies, also in the airport processes, if it becomes loads of different variations and a lot of different solutions, switching over to something new in between, it can be also confusing for the passengers. I come to one airport, I have a bag tag, I come to another, there's an electronic bag tag, I come to a third one, and we have the BagsID solution. So it is a complexity, I think, within the airport industry, being so international, being so many different airports, as we've already mentioned.
I don't mind if there's an e-tag on it or another bag tag. We just need an image of the bag. So there's the solution already.
Still need to be able to collaborate that effort. Brian, you're nodding. You're going to say something. Karen, you went to mute, by the way.
So Maurice, I was going to ask you, given Miami's cargo presence, very significant in the States, certainly, what is it that Miami's looking at as far as blockchain and future forward on cargo?
We've done a couple of things. You know, we've also recently become a pharma hub as well for pharmaceuticals. So our cargo presence has grown tremendously, and it has truly been a tangible benefit to our transportation ecosystem, which has been great. So we've done several trials within blockchain, and I've been told I have about 2 minutes to wrap up. We've done several trials with blockchain, the one being on the flight chain portion. So we're still looking at other initiatives in regards to just, you know, cargo tracking within that framework. We're also looking at a cargo community, cargo tracking type system. So we've talked to some of our stakeholders. We've reached out to the freight forwarding community to see what's going on within that space and what they're doing with blockchain, just to do some more data gathering. But it is on the horizon for us. We realize that we need to grow that level of our cargo infrastructure a lot more. There's an increased level of demand for it, and people are, more and more business entities are actually coming into the space that we're almost running out of land. We're buying property now, just buying more land to be able to address the cargo needs for the community. So for us, it's going to be one of our future initiatives. We saw it coming on the onset several years ago, and we're just working on just enhancing and developing that a little bit more. So in a couple of years, when you and I get together and have this conversation again, I should have more for you. But it is on the horizon.
Keep blazing that trail.
Yeah, there you go. Look forward to it. With that, I think we have about maybe 2 minutes. I would like to get your closing remarks on just AI, the future, some significant takeaways of sorts that the audience can have as we wrap up our session. I'm going to start with Karen, then go to Marlon, Victor, and we'll close with Brian.
No, for me, it's. I think there's a lot of potential, and I think it will be a key part in building smart airports of the future, which are more optimized and automated. And I think that the important thing is to remember that AI is an enabler, so you need to really understand the needs and what you want to do, because then maybe AI will be the solution, but maybe there are other technologies or other types of solutions that can also solve the problem. So that's my take on AI and the future.
Thank you. Marlon.
Yeah, I think I need to keep it into baggage. I think we need all need to be aware that we are in already in 2020. AI is here for a couple of years already, and I think the airports and airlines needs to start experimenting and collaborate. I think that's the most important takeaway I have.
Victor?
I'll pick up on Karen and Marlon in terms of smart airports. AI will play a key role, and the other part is collaboration. So AI needs data. It's data-driven. It's event-driven. So if we do not share the data, if we do not share the events, it will be difficult to pick up. So that will be a challenge for airports and then for other stakeholders.
And Brian, my friend, we'll close that with you.
Thanks, Maurice. You certainly don't know until you actually try, which is the very most basic. So as long as we're trying and we're moving the ball forward, and that is simply, I don't know that you can get autonomous without some level of AI involved, if not significantly involved. So to get to that truly autonomous airport, we're really going to have to leverage AI going forward. And lastly, as we're experimenting and trialing, we certainly should be coming forward to share that information amongst our colleagues across the industry.
Great. To the audience, I hope you've gotten some significant takeaways. One, thank you to my audience. Thank you for my panel members for participating today. It's been great. It's been thought-provoking. It's been very engaging. And with that, Holly, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Maurice. Yeah, thank you very much to the panelists, Marlon, Brian, Karin, and Victor. I think this was the perfect session to end our first day of Airports of the Future. If you do want to continue the discussion, as I'm sure these guys could talk for all night if they had the scope to do so, feel free to get in touch with them on the platform, schedule in some meetings and make some new connections. Also, head over to the Bags ID exhibitor stand on the sponsors and exhibitors page. But we do have a product showcase from Bags ID coming up just next. So make sure you stay and watch this last session of the day. But for now, join me in saying a massive thank you again to our moderator, Maurice, and our esteemed panelists. Goodbye for now, and I'm excited to welcome you all again tomorrow morning from 7:30 a.m. UK time. So I hope to see you then.
It's been a pleasure. All the best. Take care, guys.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.